Hello and welcome back, MC1 Gamer here, bringing you another version of Build Me a List. This is where viewers send me the list of what their collections are and ask me to try to build them some kind of a list for the match play version of Age of Sigmar, which is something that has been introduced in the fairly recently released General's Handbook. So today I got a submission. Well, I got a submission recently. I've been getting a bunch of these submissions, and thank you everybody for submitting your lists and inquiring on whether whether they can be included in an episode like this. I'm doing a whole bunch of unlockings. I have plenty of stuff that's still scheduled, but with the flood of these that I'm getting, I'm trying to pick and choose ones that are a little bit different from ones I've had before. So I'll try to circle back and get to them. If I don't get to yours, please don't be insulted. But I have a bunch that are Empire or Bretonnia of recently, and I just did one. I did the first build me a list with Bretonnia, and now I want to try and sift through some of these things and see if I could do something that's a little bit different. I've done a bunch of unlockings with a lot of the new battle tomes. Did some unlockings where I really explored some of these combined lists. Where just to try and see how to apply the General's Handbook and the way the list building is for match play with some of the stuff that we already know. But this one, I was intriguing because I haven't done anything with the Elves for a long time. And whether you pronounce them Elves or Aelfs or Elves, whatever you call them, there's a lot of people who just love the Elves. And they've always been a very powerful and very, just a very, very strong element within the Warhammer world. And their armies have always, been at various different stages, but near the top, if not the top of the competitive arena. It's certainly fun to play with. Sometimes a lot to handle to play against. But with Age of Sigmar, certainly there's been some contention because although we've had the compendiums for the old army books, and there's no longer really any army books. There's battle tomes with sub-faction specific rules that are starting to come out. But even with the match play General's Handbook selection, where there's now points added on, there really isn't any. There's not an elf army list. There's not, just like there isn't a Bretonnia or Northern Kingdoms or anything like that, or even any of these other sub factions. They're just ways of building a list. You can mix and match any way you want underneath the silos of death, destruction, chaos, and order. And even in open play, you pretty much have wild abandon to kind of even mix across those boundaries. But most of us have been comping that since Age of Sigmar came out, just self-comping because it just feels right. But in match play and tournament play, it's very much restricted. And with all these new structured rules on how to build lists and with points, well, it's opening up a lot of questions. And some people, especially newcomers to Age of Sigmar, or even people that maybe have played Warhammer but are just didn't get on the bandwagon with Age of Sigmar and now want to, they don't really have a lot to go on, and it's a lot to take in all at once. So they may need a little help. So I've got a lot of people that have been inquiring of me, about it. I got the idea from a number of people that over the course of time, even before Age of Sigmar came out, from previous when I first started on my channel, going back a couple of years, but especially since Age of Sigmar came out, to give them ideas on how to build up a list with synergy. But before points, it really, it was really mostly about the synergies. Now it's also about the points and about other things like battleline and leader, maxims on leaders and behemoths and other things like that. So I got a submission just recently from Deathwish DN. The names always make me laugh, but then again, since I'm using the title MC1 Gamer, I really, I shouldn't throw stones. In any case, so he has an interesting collection, and it is a compilation of High Elves, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves. It sounds like it's something that was a carryover from when he played the End Times. So it sounds like he was building up an army that was it was, I forget exactly how that worked out, but it seems, I'll show you the list in a second. It seems that he was at the end of the End Times when they had the whole gathering of the elves with the new rules, it seemed like that was where he kind of had this carryover army. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. I'm going to go pull that up. This is his list. And I'm going to go and try and zoom in a little bit here, and we'll go through it. You know, he's it's kind of a little bit of a hot mess when you consider Age of Sigmar, but it really harkens back to the days even before 8th edition fantasy. It almost looks like when you go back to like 5th edition, because some of these units are fairly small with, you know, there's a lot of smaller units, which I think, you know, was certainly there's a strategy in 8th edition where that made sense. But there was definitely in previous editions where the norm was 20 at maximum. You didn't have these like Death Star units where there was, you know, 40 or more guys very, very often. That was way back, you know, probably more like 15 or more years ago, where in earlier editions that was, you know, that was just the common thing. Well, now it's all over the map. So when I build these lists, it's all really about what the viewer has in his collection. And I can make recommendations of what I think he or she should purchase to try to maximize or take advantage of various synergies. But I've got the challenge here is to try and make something that's reasonably competitive and also fun to play within what he's got. So he's got a couple things from the Wood Elves, and this has been, you know, broken out in different ways, you know, based on the compendium, based on the sub factions that have been released since the match play section of the General's Handbook was released. So he's got, you know, a Shadow Dancer and a couple great Eagles from the High Elves, 2 of the High Elf repeater bolt throwers, 10 Illyrian Reavers. He was nice enough to break out the points, but, you know, I have a structure here that, you know, in plenty of access, you know, certainly to the General's Handbook. But thank you very much for making it easier for me, Mr. Death Wish DN. 10 Silver Helms, Alariel the Radiant. This is not the new version, of course, that is on the giant Death Beetle. It is the old version, Alariel, who had her handmaidens. Elif Anar, the Shadow King. Caradrian, a handmaiden of the Everqueen, which is not a unit anymore. It's an individual character. The Lothran Sea Helm, also a character. Prince Althrin, Teclis, a High Elf Prince on a Griffin. He's got 30 High Elf archers, 50 Lothran Sea Guard. Now, I can respect that, you know, the intention of trying to make a themed army, but certainly I can remember back, you know, in 8th edition at the very end during End Times, there was things like that made a whole lot of sense. But 50, there's not a lot of need for that right now in Age of Sigmar. Some units, some factions will have units of War Scrolls that make sense. Things like Skaven, Horde armies, like, you know, if you have zombies, you could do 50 very easily, and it makes sense. I don't know if 50 Lothran Sea Guard may be the thing you need or you can utilize very effectively right now in Age of Sigmar. I would highly suggest that unless you're looking to really go very themed, and you know, unless of course you want to hold out and see where things go with new tome releases down the road, which there's a lot of rumors about, and hold on to them, I might unload some of these and see if, you know, you take some of that revenue on the secondary market and turn it into some of the stuff that you can use right now. But hey, if they're nicely painted up, if they're all nice and uniform as a unit, you might want to hold on to them, and you never know, they could really be effective. You could turn them into 2 or 3 units as your battle line minimums down the road. All right, he's got a Dreadlord. So yeah, he's all over the place with all these sub factions now, all the different elves. Wanderers, he's got 16 Glade Guard, a Spellweaver, 5 Sisters of the Thorn. It's unfortunate about the Glade Guard because I guess they're sold in groups of 16 in the boxes, but they're pointed per 10 models. I hate when they do that, but you know, that's one of the problems when you have points, man. You know, it doesn't always work out for everybody. You know, I'm still critical of points, but you know, we live in that world now. It's not the only way to play, but it is going to be a very common and popular way to play. All right, so Phoenix Temple, he's got a Flamespire Phoenix, a Frostheart Phoenix, and an Anointed. So there's a lot of things that are missing here that I'm kind of surprised about. Things like, you know, Phoenix Temple, he doesn't have any Phoenix Guard, which would have been amazing. You know, I look up at like the Dark Elves. He's, you know, very thin on the Dark Elves. He's got a couple smatterings here and there. This is a typical collection that's going to be carryover from before Age of Sigmar, and now you're trying to shoehorn it into Age of Sigmar, and we can do it. We will get this done. All right, so let's keep going. You got the Order Draconis, a Dragon Noble, which is a character. He can either be on foot or riding a horse. Ride a horse. It's just put him on a horse because it doesn't cost any extra points. You might as well. You get the benefit of movement. You get a couple extra attacks. He's got a Dragon Lord, which is a mounted on a dragon. He's got 10 Dragon Blades, which are like the mounted cav, the dragon cav. Like they've been renamed since the 8th edition. Just so you know, things like the Flamespire Phoenix. And even I believe the Frostheart Phoenix, there's no extra points to put an anointed on them if it says it in the War Scroll. So do it, because there's a lot of great advantages. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. And frankly, if you're not using the anointed in your list, just put him on the base. He's just stick him on the base. If anybody says, where is he? He's supposed to be riding that. Well, he's sitting on, I got a model, he's sitting on the base. Or not. Just say there's an anointed on here. Nobody should be giving anybody any grief about that, especially if it's a legacy army being carried over. We should just be happy these people are now coming back to the game and playing Age of Sigmar, and just thrilled that the ranks are starting to swell, that the game is growing. He's got a War Hydra, which comes with its handlers. It's part of I think it's part of the War Scroll. I think you even get a couple extra attacks from it. We'll have to take a look. He's got Lion Rangers. He has 1 chariot and 10 white lions. And let's see. Okay, so he's got an Eldritch Council where he's got 3 of these Archmages. Wizard spam was definitely a thing, especially in open play. You can certainly do that. You have a lot of options in open play with with collection that you have here. But there's going to be restrictions. We're going to have to make some serious choices for match play. A Lore Master, 10 of the Sword Masters. For 200 points, they're well worth it, even though they're a little more costly. And then again, Daughters of Cain. This is from the Dark Elf list, and a Sorceress. He's got the Sisters of Slaughter, 10 of them, and then from the Darkling Covens, a Sorceress. So there's a whole lot of stuff all over the place. It's kind of a mishmash of the Dark Elves, the High Elves, and the Wood Elves. So how do we shoehorn a list in here and make it so that it's going to be effective in a competitive environment for 2,000 points on average? Now, you can do a list for 1,000 points if you want, which is totally fine. I know some tournaments I've heard of that are trying to do 1,500 points. Just so you know, you're using the levels at 1,000, and you just have basically 500 more points to play with. You don't have the restrictions and the opening up of additional slots until you get to 2,000. I don't know any way anybody could think of that in any logical way other than how that works. The opening of the slots happen at those tiers. It's the way it's always been, and probably the way it'll always be. It just makes sense. That's how these charts work. But I know that some people have been discussing and talking about how it's interpreted differently. If you don't agree with that, play it the way you want. All right. If you're not hurting anybody, if you're doing it that way, you're not wrong. Technically you may be wrong, but you're not wrong. Your fun isn't wrong. So just go do it that way and have fun with that. But the way it's organized, it just does. It certainly makes sense that those tiers work the way they do. So 1,000 points, just to get back to that point, 1,000 points is a small game. It's a quick game. You can get 2, 3, 4 games in really easily, and it's very easily to do team matchups with 1,000 points. But it's one of those small tiered. Some of them get starter boxes aren't even 1,000 points. They're usually around anywhere from 500 to 700 plus points on average. So 1,000 points is probably the first organized game setting. You're probably going to play it on a 4x4 map. It's not even a full 6x4 map. I think it actually even recommends doing it on a 3x3. 2,000 points is what most TOs have been putting their game at. Most TOs have been placing it in that category, and I think and 2,000 points really feels like a 2,500 point game from 8th edition. So this is the methodology that I'm using when I do my unlockings, which is the other series that I'm running. I've got a bunch of series run. I've got convert this ! For various different types of converting ideas, and I've got the unlocking, which is going over the either the tomes or the factions specifically, maybe some of the sub factions, and then this one is just viewer submission. So when I look at this one, most of them is going to be at 2,000. The other one, the unlockings typically are 1,000, 2,000, and 2,500, because those are the tiers in the match play book for the various different organizational restrictions and requirements. So this is going to be a 2,000 point list because, again, I organize events. I do I've planned on organizing more of them. I plan on getting more involved in that aspect. But I talk to a lot of people who do as well, and everywhere I'm hearing most as widespread as I can hear, from overseas to in the States here where I am, and from eastern to seaboard to the West Coast, I'm hearing almost everybody's doing 2,000 points as the standard for organized play. So this is where we're going to go with that. So here is my list, and I'll give you the examples and the reasons why I picked what I did. So here's what I decided with this list. Now, this is just one way to build out this list. It's just one method with all that collection that this particular viewer had, and I'm going to give you the rationale behind it. The first thing I want to talk about is, this is not in any particular order. I shoehorned these great eagles. It's one unit of great eagles. I think it's just one eagle at the end. So I'm going to get back to this. There's a reason why. I had 60 points left over, so it was a good way to put this to put the great eagles in. But for the actual for the rest of this, I'm going to start with the repeater bolt throwers. These are 120 points a pop. I want to try and get 2 in there because I like the idea of, and this is one of the throwbacks to, old editions. You'd have 2 different war machines, and you could put them on either side of the table, and you get a whole, or you could double them up, and you can get, you can try to overlap the field of fire and make sure if one missed, then the other one would help out. But I also like the idea of separating them because your opponent has to, try to devote more attention, more resources to try and take them both out. And if one misses or if one gets destroyed, you still have a backup with another one. And if they're sitting right next to each other, whatever destroyed one, unless it's long range, can just waltz over and destroy the next one the next turn. So I tried to get 2 in here, but there's a lot of other things that are in here. So when I looked at the points and I looked at what I needed to do, I decided, you know what? 1 is good, and it's not a bad thing to have. So I'm going to go pop over, and we're going to take a look at the repeater bolt thrower, and we'll do that with the high elf list. And let's see, I'm just going to zoom down. Sorry if this is making anybody, giving anybody a headache, but I have some of this stuff queued up, but some of it I have to go to the actual PDF, the compendium PDF. All right, so we'll get back to the Great Eagles thing here. Let's see if I can find the bolt thrower. And if anybody's wondering if this looks kind of strange because you don't know what I'm scrolling through here, this is the PDF that was the original free PDF that you can still get, that you could download through the GW website, and it would get. Of course, I can't find it while I'm talking because I can't do 2 things at once. But this was the first introduction to Age of Sigmar, but it was a carryover from the previous version of the game. So let's see if I can do this a second time, and we'll take a look at the bolt thrower. Here we go. All right. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that, and I'll zoom in. And the keywords this is really going to be an order list, okay? So we're really looking specifically at order here. Order is going to be the universal link, so we're going to be using the allegiance abilities for order. Okay, so each one of these, you're only going to have 1 here. It has 1 attack, but if you have 2 crew, it can actually shoot twice. If you use the Ithelmar bolts, if you use repeating bolts, it's 6 shots, i.e., it's going to be that much more, 12. So the idea is that you can get a lot of shots, but these 2 segments of shooting are going to have different types of, they're going to be really for different types of targets. One of them is going to be a little bit easier to hit with, 3 up, 3 up. The other one is 4 up, 3 up. The decision that you're making is, do I have less shots that I'm going to do a little bit more damage each shot and punch through armor a little bit easier, or more shots to give me more chances to put wounds on target? The reason why is the Ithelmar bolt, as opposed to the repeating bolt, has a better rend. It's -2 versus 1, and does 93 damage as opposed to 1 each. So you're going to have a lot less attacks, but when you hit, you're going to be able to, and there's a little bit better rate to hit too, you're going to be able to mitigate the armor much easier. -2 is very good. There's a lot of abilities that function up to -1 rend, but then, like defensive things, like for instance, the Seraphon, the Lizardmen, they have a lot of defenses where they ignore rend unless it's -2 or higher. The Iron Breakers for the dwarves also have something similar to that, where unless it's -2 or higher, they get a nice boon. The bottom line is that this is for highly, very, very good, well-armored foes, even monsters. It could be monstrous infantry, multi-wound units. The bottom line is you want to be able to shoot this at those types of units that have the really good armor, because you want to try and mitigate it. -2 is uncommon. Okay, -3 is extremely rare, very rare. Common is a -1. The most common, obviously, is a dash, which is no rend. And the other one with 6 shots with full crew, you're going to get 12 of these. They're at -1 rend. No joke, that's pretty good. Look, the 3 it becomes a 4. A 4 becomes a 5. I mean, it has an impact. And those each are a 1 wound each. These are good. The thing I like about this is the 36 inches. That's a good distance of the table. I mean, the width, not the length, the width of the table is 4 feet. These things can move too, by the way. The idea is you want to take at least one, because it's going to give pause to any units within range. It's going to be able to cover a certain segment of the battlefield. You might want to put it dead center. You certainly want to put it up with some elevation on a hill or whatever. But you also want to make sure that you want to put it on some kind of terrain piece, ideally, because you'll get the cover bonus to that save. That 5-up save becomes a 4-up, and that happens with war machines too. Why? Only monsters lose that. So traditionally a hill, you don't get it because they FAQ'd that, GW FAQ'd that. But I would try and find. It could be in a tree grove. It could be in a forest. It could be in a set of ruins. It could be in a building. Whatever. Get this thing into some cover so you can get that extra bonus, because this thing is going to get targeted, certainly. All right. So moving on, we're going to look at the Illyrian Reavers. Now, the Illyrian Reavers, again, I have to go to this sheet, because some of these things you can't easily find now on the websites, just so you know. If you do a search, I don't know if they're phasing these things out. They're not going to phase out the War Scrolls, but some of these models might get discontinued, and you're going to find it a little bit more difficult over time, to find them, especially characters that are made of metal. But Illyrian Reavers, I couldn't find myself. Don't look into that too deeply, but I couldn't find them if I just did a quick search on the US site. But I love Illyrian Reavers. They're really good. Now he has, I'm just going to quickly scroll, click back here. He has 10 of them. So I decided for battleline, that's the first thing you need to look at. You look at synergies and you make your decisions, and you change them based on characters or other things that might have synergies with some of these units. But you got to look at your battleline first. And I wanted to try and minimize the battle line, mainly because this viewer has very few units that are more than 10. He might have 20 I think he had the highest was archers, which I think he had 30. And I think it was Lothar and Seaguard, which he had 50. But other than that, there's very little that he had more of that, more than 10. So he'd have, so these Illyrian Reavers, he has 10 of them, which means you could buy them twice and take them in 2 units. You could potentially put them into 1 unit. But here I wanted to, just because there weren't a lot of units that I could build out to 20 or more to get potential quantity bonuses. There's a lot of rules. If you have more than X number in your unit, you get, rerolls to hit or reroll 1s or whatever. You get a different bonuses. The Illyrian Reavers doesn't have that, but the idea here is that they have some very special things they bring to the table, but they also are battle line. They're standard order battle line. They don't have a requirement within a sub-faction to say that if you're just this one sub-faction, these units become battle line. There's a lot of those. There's a lot of those in each of the big factions, but he doesn't have enough of these types of things to flesh out just a specific sub-faction for within order. So this has to be a general order list, and as a result, you might as well just pick from whatever battle line you have, because you're not going to get access to the better, more elite troops for any of the sub-factions that might have that. Okay, so with that in mind, Illyrian Reavers are a great choice. So I want these in 2 units, 2 units of 5, and here's why. Let's go get to that. Let's go get back to that. First of all, they're tougher than they used to be. They only have a 5-up armor, not a big deal, but they each have 2 wounds. So there's 10 wounds on this unit. They have great range, 16-inch range. Each one gets 2 attacks at its base, and we'll get back to that. So remember that. They each get 2, so this 5-man unit is shooting 10 shots. So you've got 20 shots now from each of these 2 units, and I harass either of the flanks here just to potentially go after wizards, war machines, any weak targets. They're only 4-up to hit. They have no rend and 1 damage, but these are the kind of things that are going to plink off a wound here, a wound there, start reducing a unit, thinning it out, maybe even wiping out a war machine potentially. But the real benefit here, they do have a little bit of offensiveness in close combat, but not much. The best thing about them is that they each now have 2 wounds. Back in 8th edition, they only had 1 wound each. But here's the benefit here. Now, they have a champion, so that champion's going to get an extra attack. But this is where it says, first of all, Illyrian purebreeds. In the shooting phase, before or after making attacks with this unit, you can roll 2 dice and move all the models in this unit up to that many inches. Models cannot start or end this move within 3 inches of an enemy unit. That's key, because before it breaks the whole dynamic of movement, the various different movement phases. In the game, you have 3 different movement phases. Effectively, you have movement, you have charge, and then you have pilot. This is an ability for you before or after you actually shoot. You can get a free move. And that's key, because if shooting comes before movement, it actually doesn't. Wait a second, no, I may be wrong with that. I can't believe I'm actually forgetting this, but I've got a lot of things going through my head, so forgive that. Plus at least 1 glass of wine, because this is post dinner. Anyway, but here's the idea: before you shoot, you can decide whether or not you want to do this. Now, let's say you're within range. You can go ahead and make your move. Make your shots, and then move away. So you can roll 2 dice and move further away from your opponent, therefore staying within that 16-inch range, but well out of the potential for somebody to get within, be able to charge you, or even potentially shoot at you. Because let's also realize that even though it's 2 to 12 additional inches on top of 16, which is your movement, which is your range to shoot, you got to realize that if somebody tries to move in on you, if they're within that range, they're going to move. They could be moving. It could be another cavalry unit. They could be moving another 10 or 12 inches and then charging another 2 by 6 inches potentially, or more potentially. There's a lot of things that give add to your charge range, or maybe allows you to roll 3 dice, take the best 2. So this gives you that added comfort that you can move these guys at the very least long range for somebody to consider going after them. So they can stick and move. They can shoot and get out of dodge. Additionally, if they're really far away, they can say, well, I'm not quite within 12 inches. I want to move within 12 inches and then get some shots off. It could be one of those situations where you're just outside of your range to go after a wizard that's hiding in the backfield, or try to take out a war machine that's been just peppering your army. Now you can go do that before you get to shooting. And this is apart from any of the other movement that you can do. Really very effective and very powerful. Really, the use of this can help you. These are the types of things that make or break a game. It's not always the list building. Sometimes it's how you utilize it. So the strategies that you use with this unit can really help you tremendously in this game. Okay, the next thing is swift volleys. All right, so as long as there's no enemies within 3 inches of this enemy unit, which of course makes you valid for close combat. You can, even if you're within 3 inches, or even if you've been in combat before, you can shoot. Okay, so let's just if you're new to AoS Sigmar, just get your head around that. If you're returning from other versions of Warhammer, just get your head around that. You can shoot. You still can shoot. Sometimes special abilities don't work, like this one, when guys are right up in your face, but you still can shoot. You could shoot to the units that are right up in your face. You could shoot units all the way across the table. The bottom line here is that if they're in combat or about to get into combat because maybe they charged even, they can still shoot, and this ability allows them to, if they're not right up next to an enemy, a foe, allows them to get an extra shot each. So now that 5 model unit is getting 15 shots. So yeah, it's a 4-up, no rend 1 damage, but it's 15 shots. So apart from the other synergies we're going to be talking about, where you can get pluses to hit, pluses to ruin, re-rolls, they're still going to get 50% of those shots hitting and wounding. And, they're going to get a couple of shots where they're going to probably get through most armors, unless they except for the really, really good, well-protected units. And then they're going to get out of dodge. They're going to get away, and they're not going to be targetable very easily. So they're going to be reasonably safe. They're very effective. Plus, they're battle line. They're generic battle line. All right, moving up to the next thing. So 2 units of those. So you can spread out to other areas of the battlefield. 1 unit of Glade Guard. Now, I really wanted to kind of, combine the Glade Guard with a bunch of different things. He has a Shadow Dancer, which, had some synergies there. I also saw there was a Spell Weaver that can restore Wander models that were slain. I think it was die 3 with a spell. I want to try and connect as much synergies as I could find, but I couldn't find any, and I couldn't fit it in the points. But I was going to utterly not even bother with the Glade Guard, but I wanted to keep the Glade Guard in there because they bring some stuff to the table that are worthwhile. The biggest thing they are is that they're a shooting unit that's also battle line. Okay, and when I looked at the other units, I looked at the Lothran Sea Guard to try and include them. They had a 16-inch range. I didn't have the ability to shoehorn in a character that was part of the collection that could give some synergies. I'm sure there's different ways we could have gone with this. This is the way I did it as I analyzed it. So let's take a look at the Sea Guard. The Sea Guard, again, 20-inch range, nothing to laugh at. That's a good range. They can move pretty good. They're 6 inches. They only have a 6-up save, which is not great, but there's if they're in cover, they can get an extra 2 bravery as opposed to just the 1 because they're going to have a banner, which is they call a pendant. They're 4 up on their hit and wound, but 20 inches, hey, that's good. There's 16 of them. I think actually it's not 16. The viewer had 16 in his collection, so I couldn't take 2 units of these, which would have been great. So I only could take 1 unit. So that's the only limitation there. But there's no rend, which is unfortunate. 1 damage. Here's why I took them. Look, they have a couple of interesting things here. If they do charge, they have a hornblower that can reroll, whatever. The Peerless Archery, they get a +1 to hit if they have 20 more models. The viewer did not have 20 models to get this ability. So I actually wasn't going to include this unit at all. All right, I was actually going to include Silver Helms from the list. But then, if you look at Silver Helms, unless they have 10 or more, they're not really that worthwhile, other than just qualifying for your battleline requirements. And then it's a lot of points to include with a unit that's kind of subpar, in my opinion. So this is, and there's another limitation. Even if you had 20 or more, and that's a lot, you're basically spending 2 iterations of Glaive Guard to qualify just for that, that extra +1 to hit. But also nobody can be within 3 inches of you, no enemies. That's a real, I was ready to just not even bother with these. Certainly if it was entire Wood Elfy type list, they'd be a consideration. But here's really why I wanted to include them. They're fairly cheap, for 10 of them. Good range. And once per game, they can shoot special arrows that are -3 to rend. So while they don't have any rend, this is a big deal, because if there is a heavily armored unit, a monster, or anything that you really need to get a couple of wounds on, especially at range, these guys are going to do that. This is a unit that's going to help you with that. And it's only going to be once per game. And why isn't that big a deal? Because probably this unit's going to get wasted before the end of the game. And if they don't, well, so what? They'll be able to achieve objectives. They can go to be a quantity unit that can go run up and try to hold an objective and score points for the scenario, which is a big thing in match play. It's not just killing your opponent; it's claiming objectives and holding them. So this is something they could do. Now, I wanted to try and get that. I think it was a Shadow Dancer that had an ability to make these guys move twice as far, or i.e. 12 inches, and even fly. It would have been really cool, because it would have been like, okay, this is your late, round 4 or 5, or later unit that you're just going to move on to an unclaimed objective and steal those points. I couldn't swing it. So if you want to try and figure a way to do that, be my guest. But I couldn't figure a way to do that. So, okay, I took 10 of those, 120 points. It's one of my battle lines. So I got my 3 battle lines. Next, I looked at the Flame Spire Phoenix. This is, he has a Frost Phoenix, but I got to tell you, if you don't know, in Age of Sigmar, Flame Spire Phoenix is better. All right, it's the Frost Phoenix is 260, I think. The Flame Spire is 280. The Flame Spire is better. So go ahead and look at the draw scrolls. Put up. I did an unlocking a while back on all the Wood Elves, High Elves. Specific compendiums for the old versions, and we talked about this when we did the High Elves. But here's the High Elf Flame Spire Phoenix. Yes, words are hard. 12 wounds. It can do. Let's see. Its attacks with its flaming talent starts out at 6. 4 up, 3 up, -1 rend, 2 damage on those. The Great Phoenix Halberd, this is the guy that's riding on back that you get for free. You don't have to pay extra points, so why not take them? So you can get a couple extra attacks there. And then look at this Wake of Fire. Let's talk about what that is. That Wake of Fire is this ability here. So you pick, when you fly over an enemy, you pick an enemy that you flew over in your movement phase. So do a lot of leapfrogging here. And then you go to the table, and starting out, it's die 6 mortal wounds. It goes, if after this thing gets wounded a little bit, it goes to die 3, and then further on down to just 1. But that's how many wounds it does. As it goes over, its Wake of Fire burns out with mortal wounds. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that does mortal wounds is good. This guy is going to be able to potentially charge, move over, in the movement phase, move over enemies and then charge them and do damage. But before it even starts, it could reduce the profile of monsters. It could wipe out a character that's been wounded. It could put a hurt on a heavily armored unit for that where mortal wounds bypasses its basic save. All good. Any magic that gets cast within 12 inches improves its saves by 1. And it says if you have an anointed writing on top of it, have an anointed writing on top of it. That's all. Just put a model on the base if you don't have it already modeled that way. It can ignore a wound or mortal wound on a 4-up after it gets its regular save. So it's got a bonus save just because you have a guy sitting up there. Why not? Of course. You also have a command ability, but I don't know. I don't think I put him as the general, but we're going to go take a look at that in just a second. No, he's not the general, but he takes up one of your behemoth spots. We're not going to be filling those. It's not a big deal. He takes up a leadership spot, but we're not also maxing out that. You can have 6 of those at 2,000 points. But this guy brings a lot of hurt. He's got a good profile to do some damage. He can absorb a lot of wounds. And I don't think I even talked about the most important thing about this guy, and that is Phoenix Reborn. If this model is slain, roll a dice on your next hero phase. On a 4 or more, it is reborn with all its wounds restored. Set up the model anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches from the enemy. This counts as the model's move for that turn's movement phase. Now, there's some contention about whether this is something you have to pay points for to have him be brought back, because it's, he's dead. All right, he didn't. I don't think that's the case. It's not summoning. Yes, you're bringing in a model. You have to pay for that with reinforcement points. If you're bringing a model from whatever source that you didn't pay initially to bring back onto the table, this is restoration of a model that already exists with its own ability. I don't believe that you have to pay for this with any reinforcement points. And I challenge anybody to argue that otherwise. But I'm sure that's going to be a FAQ at some point. But the way the FAQ, the way the rule is written, and the way they've FAQ'd it, it very much is the same as the regeneration of units that already have been paid for and exist on the table. Okay, this is just it's just the same thing. So please, let's just stick with that for right now, because I'm sure there's some people are going to feel differently. But you get this guy back on a 4-up. Okay, there are some models that automatically come back every turn. You get a new Blood Knight, a new Crypt Horror. They just come back. These guys just restore. You skeletons, die 6 skeletons. I know this is 12 wounds of a really shit kicker a model here. This is a behemoth. It's an incredibly powerful model, but yeah, it'll come back full wounds on a 4-up. So you could fail that. It could happen, but it's nice to have, and it's dishing out the hurt. Then you have a Dragon Lord. Now, I needed a general. I needed a sturdy general. So I wanted this Dragon Lord, so I pulled him out. And it's 400 points, yeah, but he brings a lot to the table. This is the general. I liked his command ability. I'm just going to start there. If the Dragon Lord uses this ability into your next hero phase, you can reroll fail hit rolls for any order of Draconis units from your army that is within 10 inches when it attacks in the combat phase. Okay, that's important, and you'll see that in a second. I'll get back to that. There's only one order Draconis unit that I have, and that is the Dragon Knights. So, but apart from some ability that would give me +1 to everything or 1 unit, I wanted something that gave a very hard-hitting unit the ability to hit that much harder. So this guy, he adds 1 to his wound rolls with the lance. He can reroll failed saves if he's carrying, because he's carrying enchanted shield. All good. He's got once per game. He can blow his horn for sound the attack. When he does so, all order units in your army within 10 inches of this model, when they attack in the next combat phase, make 1 extra attack with each of their melee weapons. This is a big deal. So you want to ride this guy next to your Dragon Knights because of the command ability and that horn. When you need it, you want to pop that. You're going to get an extra attack, and you get it reroll. You're going to get rerolling failed hit rolls. That's big. We'll get to that. He can breathe fire within 12 inches. That can do a bunch of mortal wounds. This is all good. All right. And he's got an incredible profile here. He can shoot. If he didn't run, he can shoot still with 20 inches to do, plink off a bat. He's got 3 shots. May happen. But really good profile to do lots of damage between the dragon and the rider, as well as the fact he's got 14 wounds and he's sitting on 4-up save. You can Mystic Shield that up 1, but he's not going to get any cover bonus from terrain. But you can get that to a 3-up. That's big. I want this guy to be your general. You're going to pick him, and you're going to maybe you take him with a +1 wound. Maybe he has a +1 wound from your allegiance abilities. So let's go take a look at allegiance abilities real quick. I don't have this up on the shield, so just to make it very easy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it up while I'm looking at it, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing here. So the bottom line with allegiance, let's see, is you're going to get a lot of stuff that's going to help you with battle shock initially. So your basic order ability is within 12 inches of your general or another hero. You can reroll failed battle shock, or you can reroll battle shock tests. So if you really roll poorly, you can reroll them next to him or any of the other guys who are who are from an order hero. There's a couple order heroes, so you can have some overlap here. That's good. But as far as his trait, I like the idea of giving him that +1 to his wound, because it's just getting 15 wounds now. 15 wounds. It's going to take a while to drop this guy off the table, and then people are going to have to spend a lot of time, a lot of attention to try and plink off those wounds. It's going to take a good portion of the game. I like adding what's already a crazy a monster who can do a lot of stuff at range and up close, and making him that much tougher. But what I prefer for his artifact, because you'll get one free artifact, all right, is the ability for him to now also heal 1 wound. That's the Phoenix Stone. It also works. It's very, it's appropriate. But I like the idea of healing that. Now, you can choose what you wish, but this is my choice. I like the idea if he's down 1 level of his profile, that each turn he can heal 1 wound, that he might be able to boost back up. That could be a make or break thing, certainly if you're going up against one of the other big monsters of the game. Okay, next we got the Dragon Blades. So let's talk about those guys. I love the Dragon Blades. These are, Dragon Knights. Again, with the command ability, they can get rerolls from your general. With the 1 time per game, getting 1 extra attack. Consider that fact. They're going to get 1 extra attack because of it. And let's see if it's the entire profile really quickly. All right. You can blow. All right. So all models in order from your unit make an attack with make 1 extra attack with each of their melee weapons. Okay. It does not say distinguish that it only is the rider. So if it's not just the rider, guess what, guys? It's the mount too. All right, so you're going to get, these guys each have 2 attacks with the rider and 2 attacks for the horses. Now it's going to be 3 and re-rolls. All right, when you want to pop this, you will be able to do just that much more damage. Okay, and unfortunately they don't have a Ren, but let's see what else we can get that's going to be of benefit. They add 1 to their wound rolls when they charged with their lances. You can re-roll saves of 1 with their shields, and you can, if in the shooting phase, you can actually re-roll 1s and 2s, so those 4s become much more effective. If you want to make the unit even more tough, one of your spellcasters can pop a Mystic Shield on it, and they'll start up at the 3. They can get the benefit of cover because they're not monsters, so they can get, you can get even potentially 2-up saves. You're not going to get better than that. And then they have this Ancient Dignity. This unit does not need to take battle shock tests if it is within 16 inches of any friendly Order Draconis heroes. So keep him next to your general. There's nothing right up next to him. It could be within 16 inches. You're good to go. They don't have to make battle shock tests. If they lose a couple of them, they're not going to have anybody else flee. That's key. That's a very key thing there. I like, this is going to be your heavy unit that's going to move in when you need to and just try to walk through your opponent. So you're going to have only 5 of them in a unit, but I bought 2. All right, the viewer had 10 of them. Let's maximize them. It was the best synergy I could find. I tried to go and put in another. He had a mounted, not Dragon Lord on a dragon, but on a character on a mount that I also, on a horse that you also could have included, but we just didn't have the points for it. Just to have a little bit more range in case you lose 1, and you can still have a character in range to get some of those benefits. So with immunity to battle shock, but. I took the dragon over the guy on the horse, but there's 10 of these guys. So potentially you're going to get 30 shots, 30 attacks, okay, just from the lances, all right? And you're going to get extra hits, of course, also from the hooves, another 30 shots. These guys are going to dish out so much damage. They're going to overwhelm most units, and even with good saves, some of them are going to get through. Ones always fail, and unless somebody's on a 2-up, maybe you're counting on those ones. Some of them are going to get through. They should be able to do the work. All right. So next, I picked the Lore Master. So we need some spellcasters here. I picked the Lore Master for 2 reasons. One, he has some good synergies with the Sword Masters, which I also picked, which we'll talk about in just a second. Plus, he's a wizard. We need some wizards. We need some unbinding capabilities. So I like that he has this Hand of Glory. So you can cast it on another unit, and until your next hero phase, you can reroll all failed hit rolls and wound rolls. All right. So this is something effective. I would cast this on your Dragon Lord. All right, the guy that's on the dragon. All his rolls are going to be re-rolling hits and misses and failed wound rolls. Why not? that's almost guaranteed we're going to do that. You might do it against the Phoenix too, but you want to do it against the big guy. And he's a spellcaster, so he can throw down a Mystic Shield. He can shoot off a Arcane Bolt, which does die 3 mortal wounds. But I'm going to have this guy sit next to the next unit, which is 10 Swordmasters. They're going to be hanging back, looking for an objective, looking to take an objective somewhere. Just like the Glade Guard, they're going to try and move up and get to an objective and just kind of sit there and shoot from whatever range they can, plinking off arrows. But the Swordmasters are looking to do some work. They're going to take and hold an objective that's key, that somebody's going to want to come after, and they're going to put a world of hurt down on them in doing so. They're not as mobile because they're ground pounders, but so what? Let's take a look at the Swordmasters. Let's see if I even have the I don't have the special one, so I'm going to have to go and pull up the generic one here. So I'm just going to have to scroll through. So yeah, if this is making you sick, just close your eyes. It'll be over soon. All right. So Swordmasters. Love the Swordmasters in Age of Sigmar. Shadow Warriors, Sisters of Avalorn. If I passed it by, I have to apologize. Okay, White Lions. I wish I could have put the White Lions in there, but I couldn't. And of course, I must have passed it. So I'm going to go back up. All right. So yeah, here we go. High Elf Swordmasters of Hoeth. Let me zoom in on these guys. Okay. I love these guys. They're fantastic. They're a little more expensive, but they're worth it. They're only 1 wound each. They got a 4-up save, which is very respectable. That's a good armor save for a infantry unit. But they each have 2 attacks at 3-up, and here's the key: -1 rend. Even the White Lions don't have an extra rend. Most of the cavalry don't have rends, which is astonishing. These guys have rend. You need rend. Rend is good because if you go up against another heavily armored unit, you need to try to mitigate that. The fact that they have good hits, good rolls to hit, good rolls to wound. They only do 1 damage each, so what? But they get 20. They give me 20 attacks on this unit, 2 each. Plus, they have that -1 rend, which is going to make them more effective. What they hit, they're going to hurt. All right. So they have the benefit of, if they have a highborn within range, they get a +2 to their bravery, which is important. That's why you have the lore master nearby also, because that 7 bravery goes up to a 9. So if you lose a bunch of guys, you're very less likely to have any more flee in the battle shock phase. A blur of blades. All right. So you can reroll rolls of 1 when attacking with a Swordmaster of Hoeth. This is good. So they're going to be 3-up. But that first 3-up to hit is re-rolling 1s. That's awesome. You don't have to enhance these guys with any of these other abilities to kind of get them that re-roll. They're only missing on 2s, all right? And that re-roll of 1, again, 3-up on the second one, you're gonna get a lot of hits off these guys. You're getting 20 shots, Ren 1 damage. And then they have this nice deflect shots, which is just re-rolling failed saves in their shooting phase. Okay, I'll take it. All right, it's not even failed ones, it's any failed. So if they get shot at, they're more likely to survive. This is good. So I'm going to keep them next to the Lore Master, all good there. And then I have a Sorceress. Now, you say I know I have like 1 unit here of Wood Elves. Most of this stuff is High Elves. It's just a matter of the synergies that I could find for the best bang for your buck. But I picked the Sorceress. Why? We need some offensiveness on magic, but we also need some defensiveness. We want to try and mitigate some of the capabilities of our opponent and selectively do so. So I picked the Sorceress mainly for her spell. All right, look, she's not going to do a whole lot otherwise. And I forgot to mention something with the Lore Master. I'm going to go back to that. The Lore Master can fight. Man, this guy can fight. He's got 2 attacks with a -1 rend. He's like a Swordmaster already himself. I forgot to mention that. He's got a great sword. So he fits really well with the Swordmasters. So I want to bring that up. Okay, so let's talk about the Sorceress. Yeah, she's only got 1 attack. It's no big deal. It does -1 rend. It can do 3 damage. That's not why you bring her. All right, you bring her for Word of Pain. I had 80 points. I needed to find a way. I couldn't find something that I was happier with for the Great Eagle and for the Sorceress for the equivalent points. Honestly, just based on what was there, I wanted a secondary caster, somebody who can unbind, somebody who could cast a Arcane Bolt or Mystic Shield. But this Word of Pain is what I wanted. Elves are in some cases, they can be a little flimsy when it comes to the armor, and they could also, you want to try and reduce the effectiveness of your opponent with all their synergies and wonderful stuff to do damage against you. You do Word of Pain, you can do a mortal wound on your opponent. Nice, all mortal wounds are always good, and we've already got 2 other sources for mortal wounds. Why not another? But what I like the most about it is that any hit rolls you have to subtract 1 from to hit. All right, for that unit. And it's a 16-inch range. So from 16 inches away, you can selectively pick a unit that is engaged with your opponent or about to be, maybe it's put in a position where it's probably going to charge and get into the fight, or it's already in the fight, and you can mitigate some of their ability to attack against you, against your units. That's what I want this sorceress to do. She is just another caster. What I, it's the fact that she's dark elf and she's the only dark elf thing on the table that for this list. So what? It doesn't matter. She's order. All the order is still going to come into play, and it's still going to be effective. All right, and then we're going to go back to the Great Eagles. All right, the Great Eagles, and I think this is from the Wood Elves. I'm not sure if it was Wood Elves. I think it might have been. I'm going to see. I'm not sure if it was. Let's see. I forget if there was Great Eagles in the High Elf list. I'm going to go take a look real quickly if there's any Great Eagles in the High Elf list. I had 60 points to spend. Could I have dropped the sorceress and combined those 2 points to get something for 140? 80 points for the sorceress was the best deal I had, and the other options that my opponent had. No, I don't think this is on this list at all. The other options I had were all 100-point guys. And I wanted to try and maximize this to 2,000. Now you could try to go and get a 1980 list or 1960, so you can get that extra boom, that rerolls of something. Fine, if you want to do that, go ahead. I want to try and get to 2,000 just for the sake of getting to 2,000 and get the most bang for my buck. What I like is the sorceress has a reason. So does the to be there. So does the Great Eagles. And the Great Eagle, here we go. Great Eagle. It's in the, of course, it's in the Wood Elf list. I like what it has. First of all, I wanted to try and fit 2 of these guys in there, but I couldn't do it. But it's got 4 attacks, and if it charged, it gets 6. Not bad. Not bad. It's not great. This thing has 16-inch move, though. Shitty save at 6+. But it's got 4 wounds. It's one guy. If they're going to put all their attention on this unit, they're not putting it on something else. But if they ignore it because there are much more greater threats, this guy can go war machine hunting, go hero hunting, go wizard hunting. And I like the Soar Away ability. At the end of the combat phase, he can retreat from close combat, even if he's right up in usually you have if you're right up in close combat within 3 inches, you only can retreat. But what this guy can do is he can roll 3 dice. All right, and this is how far he can retreat. All right, instead of 2 dice. So he can get really out of, if he gets stuck into a bad situation, he can get really out of dodge. And what I also like is that you can bait, opponents if they want to come after this thing and wind up somewhere completely off to the other side of the map. But what this guy's job is to sneak in there, probably try not to get attention. If he gets attention, something else isn't. Get past the, get around and the defenses, fly over them, 16 inches, nothing to sneeze at. Go after war machines, go after wizards, go after characters, and see if you can put a couple of wounds on them. That's the goal, and that is the entire list. So I have to say that I think it's competitive. I think it can do some damage. I think there's some good synergies here but let's also realize there's certainly better ways we could build a list if we had all the models available to us that we wanted to. This is one of the better ideas I could come up with after looking at a couple of different ideas, and it works. It works with the viewer's collection. It has some very good strong points. It brings some scary stuff to the table that can dish out mortal wounds. That provides a wealth of attacks. It can really put a hurt on opponents with fast movement, with good shooting. There's a wealth of shooting from a variety of different sources. It's not one-trick pony. There's decent levels of defense in terms of unbindings with multiple ways to cast spells, and to unbind from multiple sources. And it's diffused across many different units. It's not you're going to be able to take objectives. You're going to be able to try to defend objectives. You're going to be able to challenge your opponents for objectives. So I don't think it's such a bad list. I'd love to see how it performed. And, for the viewer, please tell me how it works out. I hope you give it a shot, and I hope to learn more about it. And I want to thank everybody who puts these lists in and inquires what's the best way to kind of put a list together competitively with my collection. And if you've got a list, feel free to send it to me. You can go ahead and just do it on my back end, just on my channel. Click on where my name, MC1 Gamer. Go to the About section, and you can email me a list that way. If as long as it's not something that I've done again and again and again, I'll try to push it up to the top. If it's something that I've really I've hit upon a lot, I'll put it in the queue and I'll see if I can get to it. I will try to do it as quickly as I can. And check out some of my other videos, things like unlockings and just various other things I've got planned. I will be away starting middle of next week for about a week, so there'll be some thin stuff. I'm trying to film some stuff that I can queue up while I'm there. But either way, keep a lookout, and thanks for tuning in, and have a great day, everybody.